Well, hello, and hope everybody's having a good lunch or had a great lunch after Eastern time, and on the West Coast, everybody there getting ready for lunch. Anyhow, today we're moving in a little different direction than our typical webinars have been, and with the audio, comms, and RF, and we're going even more virtual today, software, and talk about a popular topic. Vectorworks plugins. Who would have thought? And I selfishly wanted this for myself because this is one of my favorite products that I use. You know, obviously Vectorworks is a standard in the production community. And we thought, well, let's figure out how to make this broader where we can. And so joining us today is Andrew Dunning with Landru Design. Before we get into Andrew's presentation, which is everybody, all right, I'm just gonna put a disclaimer out right now. We're not gonna get through everything everybody wants. It's 2 hours. We're gonna do our best. We'll probably go long like we're known for. But before we start that, we're gonna let people keep logging in. They keep joining us very quickly. So while we're waiting for that, Mac and Pete, it's good to see you guys again. And you know, obviously Vectorworks is something that we all run into in different ways. Myself as a designer, audio, you know, laying out the systems and mixing. Mac, you as well. Pete, with infrastructure, I guarantee you that when we're on shows together, you're on other folks' shows, you're getting access to those same drawings via Vectorworks. Maybe it's through the viewer, maybe it's the full version, but why don't you, Pete, why don't you set us up on our Q&A process for today, because I'm sure it's going to be busy.
Definitely will. Right up here on your screen, there's a control panel for your viewer, and one of those pull down gray bars is questions. So just pull that down, type your question in. Not everybody will see those necessarily. Some people do, some people don't. But we see them all, and we will be forwarding them on and keeping a list of them, first in, first out. And we'll pass them on to Andrew at certain key points during the show. We're not going to try to interrupt everything that's going on, because this train of thought, we don't want to confuse Andrew, so we won't we won't do that. I do see Vectorworks programs a lot, and I tend to just view them. Mac is a heavy user of it. He can tell you 2 seconds of his experience with it.
Actually, my experience, I'm eager to see this presentation too, because I have a lot of catching up to do, because I started out in 2D drawing, and I think that way, and I really need to think in the 3D model. And I'm hoping to learn a lot today.
Well, I think that makes two of us. Andrew, if we all could, we'll probably just be back here as quickly as we can, just watching what you have to say. As I said earlier, this is a standard for me. This is a tool that even before I go into L-Acoustics software, before DMBs, before JBLs, before anybody else's software, as soon as I get a drawing from the technical director or from the producer, I'm immediately using your plugins to model where I think I'm going to go and how I'm going to work. So to me, it's the go-to to start the whole discussion. Then I'm still using the manufacturer's tools. This does not replace that, but it does such a brilliant job of helping me approximate what that coverage is going to be, combine that with some experience, and also whatever I can negotiate from lighting in terms of ceiling space.
You're welcome.
Beg away from the screens. There we go. So I think
I literally don't know what's going on until I see the drawings.
Exactly. This is what it's about. So, you know, they're going to keep coming in, and yes, this will be available to view afterwards, because there's going to be so much stuff, and we're going to keep moving. I'm going to get off the screen now, and Andrew, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Just to give you all a feel for what my background is, my business has two facets to it. One is live production. I'm usually hired as a lighting designer, but that usually morphs into some production design duties as well. So very well, very versed in that. A lot of corporate work, a lot of faith-based events, and a lot of house of worship work. So nice diversity. A role I end up playing in a lot of my events is that of, I'll use the word curator. A lot of teams I work with don't have a lot of Vectorworks or CAD background. So I end up being the person who keeps the model. I'll get information from the other departments, and we'll work through collision issues, cable paths, sightline issues. We were joking earlier about, the screen being in front of the PA or vice versa. We work, through that kind of stuff ahead of time. So it's a fun role to play. The other part of my business is very much Vectorworks based. I've developed, I think we're up to 15 or 16 tools that are used by 15 or 1600 users, and I think we're up to 35 countries around the world now. And versions of those tools have been licensed back to Vectorworks. So part of my business, I develop tools for my use, and others are using them as well. So that's kind of cool to see. And then the third part of the business is I do Vectorworks training, both one-on-one and with teams. Thoroughly enjoy that, because every time that I lead a seminar or teach a class, I learn a lot. Everybody brings a different, little something different to the table, and I love the fact that I learn. So for those of y'all who've been through one of my seminars, thanks for teaching me. Thoroughly enjoy that. I love a day in which I learn something. So for our time this afternoon, we're going to be primarily looking at our family of plugin objects. For those of y'all who are users already, maybe you'll get a trick or two of the ways to use the tools. For those of you who aren't, maybe you'll get an idea of how the tools could help you. And then interspersed with looking at the tools, we'll try to throw in some tips and tricks. I think Kelly used the phrase best practices. We'll chase some of those. In the context of our discussion, I'll be coming back to this model a few times. This is just a dummy show that I put together. We've got a room size of 165 by 240, and that's in feet for our folks coming in from Europe. And the client has asked the venue to go ahead and lay in seats. They know their specs, and for once it's something I don't need to worry about. Client said we need at least 2,300 seats, and so the venue is laid in seats, leaving us space. So some things I don't need to worry about. Okay, I'm going to change over to a more blank file to start looking at the tools. And the first of the tools is called Stage Lift. And I'm starting here because it's by far the simplest of them all. I'm going to select the tool from the palette. And when I come into my drawing space, we see a ghost image of it. It's a point plugin object, meaning it's expecting me to click to insert and then click again to set rotation. So I've done that. And then we get our object properties dialog. And you're going to see these throughout the presentation. I'm just going to hit OK to accept the defaults. And now we have a very familiar sight to everybody. Hopefully nobody's cringing. This is a hybrid object, meaning we're looking at 2D and we get 3D at the same time. None of the geometry that you see exists anywhere on a hard drive. This is all geometry being created on the fly, and that's going to be common with a lot of our tools. Okay. But what's cool about this is, unlike the days when we all were trying to make lifts, using symbols, and every time the height would change, we'd have to reconfigure a symbol. With a plugin object, we can do it on the fly. So it's minimum height, it's a little over a foot, and I can come over and I can say, let's make our height 12 feet. And we watch the lift reconfigure itself, and the mass start extending out somewhat realistically. And if we say, hey, can we make our trim 50 feet? It won't go to 50. It's got a little bit of error trapping built in. Okay. And with this tool, options that we've got, we can change the colors of the forks. you know, the legs and base, the hardware, and let's change the color of the mass to silver. And we come out and we do a quick OpenGL, and we can see that we've got, you know, the familiar site, a lot of show files or a lot of shows, and we can change it back to black, you know, just with a button click. One thing that is going on here that you may not notice unless we zoom in and change the rendering mode, change the final quality, is that all of our tools are generating 3D geometry with textures mapped. You don't have to manage those textures. The tools are generating them on the fly for you. So like you'll see here, see some reflections, you know, in the paint, a little bit of shine on the casters. Okay, those are all textures, and again, they're created on the fly. You'll see them showing up in your resource manager with a VS prefix to them, so you know that they were generated by VectorScript. Okay, so that's just that's a quick look, again, a simple tool, but I want to make sure everybody saw it. Getting a little bit further in terms of complexity is what we call Stage Deck. It's another point plugin object. So I'm going to click to insert, click again to set rotation. And again, this is a hybrid object. We can create, I'll go back to 2D. We can create either rectangular or round stages. And if it's round, you can change the diameter. Actually, I shouldn't have made that 240 feet, should I? And it's not going to be happy with me now. There we go. So there's a 240-foot stage. So let's make it back to 24 feet, something a little bit more reasonable. And you can see it's generating in both 2D and 3D. It's placing, you know, legs around for you. I'm going to go back to rectangular because that's where we're going to spend the bulk of our time in the next few minutes. With the rectangular stage, we can have legs, we can show bracing, we can go folding, we can even do a simple, which if we go to 3D is just an extrusion. So if you want to work very quickly without any overhead, you know, that simple mode makes a world of sense. Okay, I'm going to go back to legs basic. I'm going to work in, I'm going to make that change in 2D because Vectorworks seems to like it when I make the changes in 2D instead of 3D. And one thing I want you to see here is with the complexity of this tool, we start having some more texture options. We have a default, you know, deck color of black. I'm going to change it to a custom texture of this carpet that I've already got in the file. And we're going to change the trim from either black or silver to a custom of this brass. And then our legs and structure, same thing. We're going to grab this brass. And we come out here and we do a quick OpenGL rendering. And you can see that we have had those textures applied. And it's, you know, a few button clicks. You don't have to go, you're searching around, figuring out how to apply textures to 3D objects. It's all done for you. Something I'm not sure if a lot of users know about is the way that we can display text on these objects. We come down to text options. And let's say I want to display a general footprint. And how about height? And we can display this information in both drawing units and secondary units. Or we can say, regardless of drawing units, I want feet and inches, and my secondary, let's say we want millimeters. And the height, regardless of drawing units, let's say we want inches, and then come down to millimeters as well. And we're going to hide the element labels, and I'm going to make my text red just to have a color. And we can see now on our object, we've got size information, both imperial and metric at the same time, regardless of what drawing units are. And this is it, instead of using a data tag, this is all built in. So you don't need another tool, you know, to be able to get that information, be able to communicate, you know, folks, if you're doing work between the States and Europe, for example, or other parts of the country that use the metric system. So I'm going to go ahead and hide my text. And again, the name of that tool is Stage Deck 2. Taking Stage Deck 2 to another degree is a tool we call Stage Plug 2. And the idea is we want to sometimes create risers that are odd shapes, you know, not always rectangular or round. And so we're creating what we call a path-based object. And up here, you'll see the controls similar to the polyline. And what these red dots are telling me is that Vectorworks is wanting me to mark where vertices go. So I start marking where vertices go, and then come back to my beginning, and I hit OK. And now we get a goofy shaped stage piece with legs sort of dummied in. Okay, and we've all had to build odd shapes like that for projects, so hopefully that'll be a welcome thing for you. The next tool in this little family is what we call Stage Steps 2. Okay, and Stage Steps is just like the name implies, it's for making step units. And something that's interesting about this tool is if we snap to a stage deck or a stage plug, it's going to grab the height of that stage deck or stage plug. So like this deck, we come over here and we can see that it's indeed 4 feet tall. And we come over to our step unit and voila, it is 4 feet tall as well. We can build a bunch of different structures. You know, I'll go to a 3D view so you can see there's your basic, you know, arena. I call it a self-adjusting. You know, we can do that. We can do a frame. We can do solid all the way down to the simple that I showed you with Stage Deck. I'm going to choose the open freestanding. And there's what an open looks like, basically, you know, a wooden step unit. And I'm going to say we want our width to be 4 feet instead of 3 feet. We can change the width of the wood underneath. We can make the stringers on the outside or the inside of the steps. One thing that we can do is come down here where it says step details, and we can change the number of steps. So like right here, it's saying that each individual step rise is going to be 6.86 inches. So maybe a little shallow. So what if we knock our steps down to 5, and now we're at a nice 8-inch, nice comfortable rise. So the tool's giving us that information so we can build a, you know, a step unit. Something else I'm not sure if users know about is we can display either an up or a down arrow. So let's say we want to display up, and we see the arrow displayed. We come down to our text options dialog, and hey, we want to see a label for the arrow, and let's make it red in color. And now we have up, you know, marked. You know, imagine doing you know, stage plots, and you want to show step units on a stage. It'd be nice for people to know, hey, we're going up or we're going down, you know, things like that. Nice communication tool. Okay, the last tool from this little set is what we call Stage Ramp. Similar idea to Stage Deck in that if we snap to, similar concept to Stage Steps in that if we snap to Stage Deck, it's going to grab the height. Okay, and you can see here the height is 4 feet. We can build a structure. We can do the legs again. We can do just a ramp. We can do simple. We can even do a truck ramp if we want. So it's building that in 2D and 3D. Okay, I'm going to come back and let's just use simple to make things work as quickly as we can. We can build ramps based on a number of different criteria. We can say, I want to build a ramp based on the ramp length. And the ramp length would be, you know, that, I'll go to a front view. The ramp length would be this distance right here. So, hey, I want to make a ramp that uses an 8 foot long piece of plywood. Well, now we know what we're going to get if we build that ramp. Okay, or we can say, I want to build it based on the floor length, which is this length right here. So if I say, let's make my floor length 8 feet, okay, change that to 8 feet. Now it tells me how long the ramp itself is. Okay, and something that is kind of nice in the age of everybody wanting to adhere to ADA compliance. I can also tell it, I want you to make me a ramp based on, 3 different pitches, whether it's the angle, the ratio, or the grade. So if I know I've got a 4-foot high stage and I need to have a 1:8 ratio, we know I'd need to build a ramp 32 feet long, which at some point you're probably going to end up doing a switchback or 2. But at least we know, if we know going in we have to comply with ADA, we'll let the tool do a lot of math for us. Okay, so not sure if a lot of users knew about that. That's actually been a really welcome feature for me because I actually use my own tools. Okay, and we come back to our model, and I'm going to change, actually it's already here, my design layer is set to ground main, and my active class is set to stage parts. I'm going to come up here and grab stage deck, and I'm going to insert 1 instance, and then I'm going to snap and insert another 2. I'm going to select them both and do a quick duplicate using Command D or Control D, and snap and move it over. Select all 6, and then I'm going to come over here and grab the Move by Points tool. I'm going to make 7 duplicates, and I'm using my depth of my stage as my reference. So now I've got a 32 by 48 stage. And something that I've ended up liking doing is adding a height somewhere on the stage. So I'll select a piece, and I'll come out here to text options, and I'll say, let's see the height. I don't want to see the label. And let's say I want my text to be 40 point. And then when we have that little blue box, that means I can move the text. And then I'll just move it over. So now we've got a label for our height. Let's add some step units. And I'm just letting the tool grab the defaults just for the sake of time. Except for we look at our ramp, and that's probably a little steep. So I'm going to make my ramp 16 feet long. Otherwise, that's just going to bug me. Okay, and a question that frequently gets asked, and we may talk about it when we get into the other tools. The idea of these tools is not construction drawings. The idea of the tools is to let you do some quick visualization, get a reasonable 3D model of what you're wanting to build. Okay, we're not trying to replace real carpenters, or when we get to the audio, we're not trying to replace a real engineer. We're simply trying to get an idea of a footprint and how things may look. But again, with a few button clicks, we're looking at hybrid objects. So we're building a 3D model while we're building that 2D drawing. Okay, so that's a quick look at the staging tools. I want to take a second and chase back to the either Pete or Kelly used the phrase best practice or a tip. I want to chase a question that I see asked over and over again out on especially the Vectorworks Facebook groups. People always ask the difference between classes and design layers and best practice for organizing drawings. Vectorworks gives us these 2 constructs to give us some really basic but powerful drawing organization. Classes and design layers are very similar, but at the same time quite different. Best phrase to remember the difference is to think in terms of what and where. And again, I'm going to chase the way that most people are using those two features. Other people have come up with different ways. This is simply the way that most people are using them. A class is set to categorize what something is. A design layer is set to categorize or to hold where something is. So what do I mean by a what? A what could be a speaker, a light, a piece of staging, a curtain, a chair, things like that. Those are whats. Okay, a where something is just that, where it is, and it could be in space, kind of like you see me using flown and ground as my wheres. If you do a lot of corporate work, and let's say you're doing an event that has several breakout rooms, a where could be a breakout room. So you could have multiple design layers for multiple breakout rooms. The way a lot of people in the entertainment industry use the where concept is where is for a department. So a where could be sound, lights, video, scenic, etc. There's a designer in Philly named Tyler Lippman who has taken that another step, and his where combines department and location. So if ever you've seen any of his drawings, which by the way, they're absolutely spectacular, he has said, I've got flown and ground lighting. So there's two design layers. I've got audio, flown and ground, and he's carried it out. So he gets a lot of control, but he's still using that what and where concept. Okay, so, and I would say, best advice I can give you is don't mix up the what and where. Pick a system that works for you and be consistent with it. Don't use the one approach on one project, a different approach on another. You'll drive yourself out of your mind. But again, that what and where is a great thing to remember. And a little tip here, I'm going to open up a different file, and I'm going to open up what we call the navigation palette or navigation dialog. When you create classes in Vectorworks, Vectorworks wants to put them in alphabetical order, like you see on my screen here. So curtains, dimension, lights, so not really a logical order. And what happens if I wanted to have a bunch of audio stuff together, all starting with the different letter of the alphabet? You could be all over the board, okay? So what a lot of designers do is they will use a numbering system to organize things, okay? And I'm gonna pull out back to our show model, and here is the class structure in the show model, and you'll see here all of the things starting with a 0 have to do with title blocks. Everything starting with a 1 has to do with a venue. And then 2, things that go in a venue, like the audience, backstage area, tech areas. Scenic is 3, et cetera, et cetera. Now I can use the class prefixes to a certain extent, but I like the numbering system because on top of the prefixes, it keeps things in a very logical order for me. And then classes that the tools generate from elsewhere in the software end up at the bottom. So I always know where they are. I have found the single digit system to be really, really useful for me. There's a designer here in town named Scott Moore. Scott, if you're with us, shout out to you. I believe the last time I looked, he's using a 4-digit system. So he gets a lot of detail, a lot more detail than I have in my files, but it's incredibly powerful for him, being able to organize his drawings. He always knows where things are, and the people who work on his teams know his structure. So it's consistent drawing to drawing. So second tip, first tip would be the what and where approach. Second tip would be using some sort of numbering system for your class structure. Whatever makes sense to you, as long as you're consistent with it, is what I'd encourage. So how are we looking in terms of questions, Pete?
Well, we've sort of overflowed a little bit, but
Okay.
I'll hit some important ones. There are a few in here that are really require a lot more time than we have, and you can let me know if these are one of the questions. Joe Golden wants to know, can you please talk about 0.0 point location in PIO symbols? Now, if this is too complicated to discuss in the 3 minutes answer you're about to get, we can go
Yeah,
on.
that's probably one we want to chase at some other point, Joe.
Okay.
That's worth a phone call.
Jeremy Stark wants to know, what is the main difference between the licensed VW plugin versus the version that we can license from Landru Design site?
It's a really good question. With what we've looked at so far, the tools are very parallel, very similar. When we start getting into the video tools and the audio, I'll start pointing out what some of the differences are. That's a good question. I get that one very regularly. So we will get to that, and I'll try to point those out.
Steve Shelley wants to know, what scale are the plugin tools built in?
The tools are not built in any scale. The tools are totally scaleless. You're punching in real dimensions, and it builds the objects at whatever scale your design layer is set to.
Right.
I happen to be working in 3/8 scale with these models because, frankly, that's what I started working in 20 years ago, and it works well for me.
Christopher Wren wants to know, are you going to address how to create your own custom plugins?
No.
Yeah, that's one of those questions that takes too long. Okay.
Yeah, that's a multi-year question.
Got it.
What I would encourage you to do if you're interested in chasing that, you go to the Vectorworks website, and I think it's either under partners or customization. You follow the menus through, and there's an area where they've got samples that are not encrypted. You can take apart, see how they work.
Right.
A great learning tool.
Michael McDermott wants to know, if you use these plug-in objects, should the object be made into a symbol? And if so, why?
Yes, they can, and I hope I've got time to talk about that. He's asking about creating red symbols, and it's on the list. We'll see how time looks when we get to that point in the presentation.
Mark Herring wants to know, are the secondary units in VWX 2020 only?
No, the secondary units are available in all the tools back to, I think the oldest that we're selling now is 2014.
What is the difference of the deck tool versus the VW deck tool?
At this point in time, they're virtually identical.
Okay.
Not a lot of difference at all.
And what was the tool you used for the odd shaped stage where you just pointed the vectors?
Yeah, that one is called Stage Plug. It's the one in my tool set, looks sort of like a table that wants to fall over.
Kelly asks, are there issues with exporting these plugin objects to modeling programs or Grandma 3D?
Not that I know of. The one thing that I will comment on with exporting to Grandma 3D is it doesn't always deal with Vectorworks objects that have been mirrored. So if I were to mirror copy the stage ramp, there's a chance that once it hit MA3D, the mirrored copy, you'd see a frame, but you wouldn't see any solids. And they may have fixed that, I'm not sure, but nothing to do with our tools. It's just the way the export routine works.
Kelly also asked, can you apply text styles to the text tags?
At this point, no. No, the text is, the styles are exclusively controlled by the tools themselves.
Steve Shelley wants to know, can your stage deck design be built so that only every other platform has legs?
Yes, what you would do there would be, instead of, actually, we'd end up with a dummy over here, but let's say these two, we didn't want legs. I would say, instead of legs basic, I would say deck only.
So that's just an option in the one object.
Yep. So if you see here, You're basically like an arena system where these two would have decks, and then you've got a spanner.
Can you, Jeremy Stark wants to know, can you create a report on the stage to find out how many 4x8 deck stairs, like in
Absolutely.
a list for the shop?
Yeah, you can definitely do that. Go up to Spotlight Reports and create report. And the getting more detailed than that is a little bit more time than we have. But I would encourage you to do that.
How do you handle auto-generated classes? Also from Jeremy.
Okay, it's a good question. If you look at, I'll use Stage Deck as an example. You come down to the bottom of the OIP where it says Parts Classes, and all of the Landru Design tools give you this option. I can have all of the different parts simply use the class that the object is assigned to, or part by part, I can decide if I want any or all of them assigned to individual classes. So unlike other Vectorworks tools that throw you a parade of classes, whether you want them or not, with all of our tools, you have the option. And that's a pet peeve of mine, so it's pretty important that it functions that way.
Robert Evans, when you're using numbers for class organization, what do you do to manage the plugin standard classes?
I would say two things. One, plugin classes generated by the plugins will end up at the bottom of my list, so they don't go into the numbered system unless I've done something like this where I've said I want the class prefix to be the 3 space STS, which fits within my my class structure. And when I say use standard classes, it puts my prefix so it fits within my system the way I want it to. So I don't get any surprises that way. And any user can do that. That's not just my file.
We did have a little comment from Mark Dickman that the questions he's not seeing. As an attendee, you won't necessarily see the questions that are sent to us. They're using the same question place, but you will have to, the questions won't be seen by everybody. I also wanted to say that this entire presentation is recorded, and it will be available on the practicalshowtech.com website in the archive section with all these questions I'm answering right here, or I'm asking, for you to review, and the time into the video so you can sort of go back and review it. Nathan Collin asked, will you be making a more advanced LED screen plugin?
It's on the list. It is definitely on the list.
He already addressed ADA compliance for Scott Klude. James Rich wants to know, if we have a plugin set and need a plug on top for a second level, will it already start on top of the previous plug?
No, you would need to change the Z value for the one that you added, either by dragging or by typing in the Z value.
Carla wants to know, how do you activate these plugins? How do you get these plugins?
At the end of the presentation, Pete will put up a slide that'll have my website URL on it, and there's a button that says VW plugins or VW tools.
Well, that's the end of the questions we have.
Perfect.
Everybody
I was going to say, if we got one or two more, then we need to move on.
Keep adding more questions, but let's go on with your presentation.
Okay. The next tools that we're going to look at are the video tools. And just a little bit of history. These are the first tools that kind of got me started. I was having a lot of projects where, you know, the client would say, can you put a screen in my drawing? Yep, we can do that. Well, then they'd want to see their picture on it. And then they'd want to know what projector would be needed. And then it would be, what if we change the aspect from 4:3 to 16:9? And then what if, and then just this what ifs was not hard to do, just time consuming. So I said, there's got to be an easier way. And I hired a guy to kind of get me started. And this was back in 2009, I think, 2008. And now we've gone from me being a learner, I'm still learning, but now I'm helping others do the same thing. So that's a little bit of history. The simplest of the video tools is called VS4 Television. It's another point plugin object. I've selected it up here from the palette, and I'm clicking to insert, and I'm clicking again to set rotation. I'm going to accept the defaults. I'm going to go to 3D, and we can see that we've just created a television, and we come up here to OpenGL render, and we can see that we've got an image on the screen. Now, something I want to show you before we move on is this tool, projection that we'll look at, as well as the blended screen, are inserting symbols into the wrapper of I'll use the word wrapper of the plugin object, and applying a screen. Okay, the symbols are all held in this folder. I'm going to go out on my hard drive so you can see. On your, if you're running Spotlight, Designer, or if you've installed my tools in libraries, defaults, video screen, you'll see a bunch of folders. Okay, the first 5 that start with the word casings, that's where all the TV symbols are held. Projector models holds projectors, stand models, stands, and screen images, which we're going to look in just a sec, is where you can put stock images. You know, like if you've got your company logos, or you work with clients regularly and you want to put their images there, or test screens, things like that. Okay, so you'll hear me refer back to these folders in the next few minutes, but that's what's there. Any of these models, like televisions, projectors, or stands, you can create your own symbols. The same URL I referred to, where you can buy licenses of the software, there are manuals you can download. And if you download specifically the video screen manual, in the latter pages, there's a bunch of information on building your own televisions, projectors, stands, et cetera, et cetera. It's not real hard to do. You just got to follow the steps. Okay, so we've got our television. Because we've chosen a screen aspect of 16:9, here are all the casings that Vectorworks found out in those folders I just sent you, or I just showed you. Okay, and the default here was a 42-inch. Let's change it to a 55. And Vectorworks on the fly imported a new TV. You resized the screen. Something I do want to show you, and this people ask about from time to time, if I want that to be a confidence monitor, I would want to choose any of the symbols with the phrase CONF in the name. CONF means confidence. And when I do that, what it's doing is it's grabbing a symbol that is pre-formatted, leaning back with a little stand on it. So you're doing a lot of corporate work where you'd want to add those in. The right symbols will let you do that in a button click. Okay, and I'm going to go back to a straight up and down. Something else the tool will do is add an adjustable stand. Okay, and I'm going to make the change in 2D so you can see what's going on in 2D. We have a nice floor plate, and you can see the poles. We go back to 3D, and we can see our TV is now mounted on a very common looking stand. This is going to be something that's different with the Landru Design tools versus the stock, in that I can choose a stock pole height. Let's say I want to choose 72-inch, and then I can change where the TV or the casing sits on the poles. We had users who wanted to know, hey, our company only has 5 footers, or our company only has 7 footers. We want to be able to see in a drawing what happens if we raise or lower the TV. Okay, and then we can change the height on the fly by changing the casing height. Okay, something else that is unique to the Landru Design versions of the tools is about 6 months, maybe a year ago, we added 3D text to all the video tools. And a shout out to Brian Worster from Church of the Highlands. This was a feature that he requested. So thanks, Brian, for the idea. So come out here, and I want to, in my 3D text block, I want to see the TV size. I don't want to see a label. And let's say I want the text to be blue. And let's make a size 20 point. So now in 3D space, I get text on the screen. And even if I render, it still stands. So like if you've got you want to hand a team a rendering showing where different size TVs are in a room, even in a rendering, you could see that information. So again, thanks for the idea, Brian. Very, very useful. I've actually used that a bit myself. Okay. Before I get rid of that, let me go back. Want to reiterate the question about classing things. Okay, TV is the same thing. All of the tools, again, are going to function exactly the same way. You can class as much as you want or as little as you want. The only class the tools will create on the fly is the non-plot loci class, and that's going to be common with all of them. So just want to make sure that that gets cemented in. Okay, the next of the tools is VS4 projection. And this is for making single area projection screens. Similar idea, we click to insert, click again to set rotation, and I'll zoom out a bit. And you can see we now have a projector, we have the cone lines, and we have a screen. We can be either front or rear. We can have all different aspects. We can have custom dimensions based on given aspects. We can also have totally custom, or we can have round. And based on what aspect you choose, you get a list of stock sizes. Choosing a stock size, you watch the screen resize itself, and you watch the projector move. The projector, the height of the screen is determined by the Z value. So let's change that to 5 feet. And we can do different screen supports. I call them goalpost legs. I was hesitant to use somebody's trademark name, so everybody knows what that really is. And if I've chosen the legs, I can say I want to add a dress kit, and it all does it on the fly, and I can change the color of the kit as I want to. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. Okay, we can change the screen image just like we did with TV. We can change the projector. Okay, these are the stock projectors that come with the set. I know a number of people have created their own. For those of y'all who know Leonard Delgado, Leonard, if you're here, shout out to you. His projectors even have light leak built into them. So very, very realistic. I haven't gone to that point, so go see Leonard if you want more info on that. You can place the projector based on a couple of different methods. We can say, I want to place that projector based on the lens. So by changing my lens, we can see the projector move around. Okay, we can even say I want to use a zoom lens where you type in a specific zoom factor. We can even have it show a graphic of how much of that projector can move and still cover that screen. Okay, the other way to place a projector, ditch that, is I'm going to place it by distance. And by doing that, I get the little control handle, and I can drag the projector around, and now it's telling me what lens I would need. And it's also telling me some where I've got some issues for horizontal offset angle. So I would need to look at my projector specs and see if it could do a keystone correct out that far. Maybe, maybe not. Okay. The other thing that we can do with our object, and I'm going to turn off my right and left shift, is I can say vertical position of the projector. Is it going to be screen center, aligned to the top, the bottom? And just for giggles and grins, I'm going to put it on a stand. And we see that the stand sitting on the ground plane, projectors up in space. And like I said a minute ago, you can make your own stands. Again, the manual tells you how to do that. The text for this is just like television, a little bit expanded. And each one of these items will let me display a different piece of text. So I can show like screen dimensions in green, and I could say I want to see projector info in blue. And come out here, and we're now seeing projector info and screen info. And the question about what's different in our tools, we're giving a lot more detail about being able to show different text elements in the Landru Design version, along with being able to change these labels on the fly, as well as the text block like what you saw with television. Okay, taking VS4 projection, the next step, we have VS4 blended screen. VS4 blended screen works a little differently. It's still a point plugin object, but you don't see any projectors yet. We see we've got the screen image, the screen height. I could make it curved if I wanted. Okay, so I can make some changes to the screen. I come down here, I can still choose the projector. Though when I choose the aspect, we're going to get a list of resolutions. So we're going to leave it at 16:9, and I'm going to choose the 1920 by 1080. Got the same lens options. And we come down here, and it's telling us if I choose that aspect for that screen size, here's the minimum number of areas it'll take to cover that screen. If I type in a 3, it's going to say, no, dummy, you can't do that. You have to have at least 4 areas. So once I've got those set the way that I want them, I hit insert projectors, and now I've got my projectors, blending on my screen in 4 areas. We're working in 2D and 3D. Okay, and one thing that's different about this tool, and you'll hear the same language about the audio tools, is that we now have what we call a master-slave or a parent-child relationship, depending on what language you like. That means if I select my screen and I move it, the projectors will chase it, okay? But I still have control over individual projectors. And I know my projectionist friends who are watching are going to cringe, but if I really wanted to, I could say, hey, there's a column in the way, so I'm going to make these 2 center projectors, a shorter throw, and leaves these outside ones the way that they are. So I know technically not something you want to do, but it's still doable because of the whole master-slave approach. And just like I said, a bit ago about the staging tools, the whole purpose of these tools is not to replace a real professional, talented projectionist. That's never the intent. The idea is to give us tools that would let us do production layouts, figure out where a projector generally should go. Projectionist still has to do his or her job on this on site, but it lets us do some pretty effective planning ahead of time. Okay. The last of the video objects is a VS4 LED. And this tool has actually seen some evolution in recent years. The initial idea of the tool, I made it at the time where VersaTubes and MyStrips, things like that were real popular. I basically wanted a tool that would let me make a VersaTube array or a MyStrip array where I was seeing each one of these pieces, I call them modules, as one of those tubes. Now, reality is now, a lot of people are or not a lot, pretty much everybody's building LED walls. And so this tool with that evolution is letting us chase that. It's still not as intricate as it could be, back to the question that was asked a few minutes ago, but at least you're starting to get a little bit more functional. The module shapes can be any one of 5. I will say the tile cap or disc cap or dome are pretty processor intensive. So I don't use them a lot. I'm going to leave tile flat as my choice. I'm going to say my width of my tiles are going to be 0.5 meter by 1 meter. And I want you to notice something. This might be a trick. It's not on the official list. But even though I'm working in an imperial drawing, when I typed in metric values, as long as I gave it metric marker, Vectorworks still understood what I was doing. And I can build the array based on module counts and spacing, or overall dimensions and spacing, where Vectorworks will figure out the module counts, or overall dimensions and module counts, and Vectorworks will figure out the spacing. So you can work any of those ways. I'm going to leave it on module counts and spacing, and I'm going to knock us back to a single tile, and you'll see why in just a sec. My pixels per module, I'm going to make 128 and 256, and you'll see the tool is giving me a running array size in pixels. And the other thing that it's doing, and this is specific to the Landru Design version, is although I am working in feet and inches, it's giving me a running array size in secondary units. And if you are working in metric, you could say, I want my secondary to be feet and inches, whatever will make you happy. But we're tracking those secondary units at the same time. Finding very often, especially with LED walls, everybody's talking in terms of, is that a 0.5 meter panel? Well, I'd like to be able to know that on the fly. Okay, my base width, and the base is this block behind the LED face itself. I'm going to say is going to be a 0.5 meter. Okay, and what did I do? Base width, 0.5 meters. There we go, and 1 meter. Okay, so now we've got an LED panel, and this bit down here is going to be unique to our tool, and that I'm figuring out weight estimate on the fly, and I'm going to reference my weight based on a single module, and I'm going to say each module weighs 28.6 pounds. I'm not going to worry about hardware quite yet, and under note, I'm just going to call it a Chauvet F3. And I happen to remember that because I've got a regular client that stocks those. Okay, so now what I've done is I've input basic values of a single Chauvet F3 panel, and now I can be on the phone with the client and they can say, hey, what happens if we go 14 panels wide and 4 panels high? Okay, and now the tool is telling us that's going to take 56 modules, the width and height, in the drawing dimensions, the width and height in pixels, the width and height in our secondary dimensions, as well as a rough running weight. And if I want to put in, a rough estimate of 200 pounds for hardware, I can get a rough idea that wall probably weighs somewhere around 1,800 pounds. This is not at all meant to, replace real rigging estimates. This is simply, again, a running estimate. Okay, and I'm going to take that back to 1 and 1 in case I want to use that for something else later. Okay, now I'm going to pop back to our show model because A, I want to add screens, but B, I would like to show you a feature that I'm not sure if a lot of people know about. So I'm going to do a couple of things before we get going. I'm going to change my my design layer to flown main, and I'm going to change my active class to IMAG main. Okay, and I'm going to come out here to my navigation dialog, and I'm going to scroll down And where's audience theatrical? Here's the audience theatrical seating. I'm going to gray them out. I still want to see them, but I want them grayed out. And now I'm going to place a VS4 projection object. And just for giggles and grins, I'm going to line them up with this line here. Come on. And I'm going to place them out here. Okay, and we're going to say, we're going to get rid of that. We're going to say we want them to be a rear projection. We're going to leave it 16:9. That's fairly common. And I'm going to say we want you to be 7 feet off the ground. That way yours truly can walk around backstage without getting his head in the shot. Okay, and oh, what else? Let's put him on some scaff. Okay, now the question is that a big enough screen for that space? Okay, and I'm going to turn on a feature called Coverage Zone. This is a feature that was user suggested years ago, and I'll admit the first time I heard it, I'm not really sure I grasped the power. But now every event I do, this is a go-to for me. And yes, I do use my own tools. What this is doing is this is saying, based on a multiple of either the width, the height, or the diagonal measurement of your screen, this is an effective coverage area. Okay, and I have historically used numbers that I've just learned over the years for appropriate multiples of width. Had a conversation with Scott Parker. Scott, if you're there, shout out to you. At my IMS last week, his shop prefers to use the Infocom 468 rule. And that uses multiples of height. And so let's say that this event is going to be a basic IMAG and maybe some presentation support. And so using the Infocom 468 rule, basic presentations, you're good for about 6 times the height. And IMAG and video, you're good for about 8 times the height. And if you want more info on that, I'd encourage you to Google it. It can be some interesting reading if it's something that interests you. Okay, so now based on this screen I've just chosen, this is telling me my screen's a bit small. We're only going to cover and barely, that first section. So now I want to start choosing a different size screen. 11 by 20 gets a little bit better. We keep getting bigger and we're covering more of our audience, but it's still probably not what we want it to be. Come all the way down here. The largest stock size is 18 by 32. And so we can see by using these references, last row, probably things are going to be a bit small. And that again is if you're using the 468 rule, and I'll just use it for now for sake of argument. Okay, the other thing that's going on is I've said that 45 degrees off of dead on is about as wide as I'd want somebody looking at that screen. Okay, so that's where we get the angle. And I'm going to come up here and we're going to make a mirror copy. Okay, and the other thing that we're seeing is folks who, our CEOs, our big money folks, are not getting good coverage. And we're able to see that because the tool is telling us. So if I say, what if we rotate that in 20 degrees? Okay, so 2 things are going to happen there, and I'll turn off the coverage zone for this one. We can see that the people over here, instead of being tempted to look this way at this screen, people over here are in a good coverage zone to look at this screen and look at the CEO at the same time. It's an easy glance back and forth. The other thing that's happening is we're covering this area really well, and we're still covering back into here well. Okay, so again, the name of that feature is Coverage Zone. And again, it's something I use over and over and over again. Very common, very powerful, especially like if you're doing an event in a convention center and you're having to dodge columns. This helps you to see how you get around columns and still give your audience good coverage. Okay, how we look, and then the The tip I would offer up, sorry, I jumped ahead of myself. Tip I would offer up is the importance of developing what we call a template. A template is just a Vectorworks file with an STA extension that lives in a specific folder that you start, from which you start all of your files, okay? And I'm gonna open up my, my navigation dialog again. So all these classes that I showed you are all part of my template. I haven't counted lately, but there are probably 150, 200 classes there. That class list has grown over the years, but they're part of my template, so I'm not having to type them in each time. Structure that includes design layers. It's all in my template. I'm not having to type that in each time. Okay, so that's all in place. The other thing that's going on is you heard me reference, oh geez, turn my phone off, is you heard me reference textures. Well, any textures, worksheets, scripts, things like that, that get put into a Vectorworks model are all what we call resources. Okay, those resources are all part of the template. So you see here, I've got worksheets and scripts. I've got folders awaiting symbols. I've got textiles, you know, hatches, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all part of my template. So I'm not having to go hunt those down each time. Okay. And then last but not least, you noticed I started building my stage at this locus point. Okay. That locus point is my drawing's origin. Okay. So that drawing origin is the 0, 0, 0 of my model. Okay, that's predefined in my template. So I know on all of my projects, downstage center or center ice or stage center, if we're working in the round, is all part of the template predefined, so I won't get lost. So the next tip I would offer you is create a template with the class and design layer structure we talked about, and use it consistently, you know, project to project to project. You'll see your productivity go up when your consistency gets put in place like that. Okay, so Pete, how are we doing for questions?
Pretty good. I think we're almost used up the entire capability of my computer here. There are several questions here which you're gonna see this list when you get it. So there's a couple of things you want to answer directly, which are suggestions for things to put on your website, stuff like that. But David Dalpin wants to make his own custom television stand with his own symbols, custom library symbols. He would do that with the custom symbol tool, right?
The way to do that at present is you'd need to create a television that had the stand included, sort of like the confidence monitors do.
Nathaniel Collins wants to know, can he enter his own lenses which have different ratios than what you have listed in your lens
Definitely
design?
you can. You'll end up using the plugin manager to do that, and that's Tools, Plugins, and Plugin Manager. You should be able to find some info on that out in the web. But when you go there, you'll see a list of all the plugins that are available to you, and you find the video screen and you enter the lenses that you want. The one caveat is if you enter your own lenses, whenever a new version of the tool is issued, you'd need to re-enter those.
Christian David wants to know, how can I set a picture of the default screen like the way you put your logo on the screen when you're drawing TV screens?
Okay. That is, did I close it? Yep. That is simply a texture that's in a Vectorworks file that's in this folder called Screen Images. And so the tool, again, through the plugin manager, I've told it what the default texture is, and it's being imported from this file right here that says logos.
So if they have a default screen, they can put it in that tool and have it to use as a texture.
Yes, yes.
Nathaniel Collins wants to know, can you do curved and blended projection screens on your tool?
Yes. You can do curved blended screens. You can't do curved single area screens. If he may have hopped on late, by using the blended screen tool, there's a toggle. I'm inserting an instance right now. There's a toggle right here at the top that says curved, and it lets you create a curved blended screen.
Jeremy Stark wants to know, can you store custom screen casings, PJs, etc., in a user or workgroup library and have the plugins reference these symbols?
Yep, I come back to this folder structure right here where it says video screen. Any custom projectors you want would have to go in this folder. Custom TVs would go in these folders. Custom stands would go in this one. And again, there are instructions in the manual on my website, and it's old, but those instructions also refer to a YouTube video where I demonstrate making custom stands, projectors, and TVs.
Do you have a camera plugin tool?
I do
assume
not.
he means to place a TV camera.
I do not. I'm making a note of the last question about custom stuff. If you look in 2020, they added a tool called Video Screen. I think it's called, or Video Camera, I think, that may do exactly what you're asking. Let's see. Yep, it's called Video Camera, and I'm going to drag over the. This is what the icon looks like. It looks like a side view of a camcorder.
And this question has some misspellings in it. I think is the projector height measured to the center of the screen? Is the stand height measured to the center of the screen?
The stand, the feet of the stand end up on the ground plane, and then it in the record that's attached to it, it defines what its height is, and then the projector gets placed on that stand at that height.
Okay.
Best I can figure out, that's what's being asked.
Close enough, yeah. Scott
Okay.
Leathers wants to know, will you review your class numbers and have you found any similarity with others in the industry?
I would actually, we don't even, what I would say is, like class to review, zeros are for title blocks, ones are for venue, two, and this is Andy's logic, things that go into the venue like the audience, backstage areas, and tech. 3 is scenic and soft goods. 4 is truss. 5 is all lighting. 6 is all audio. 7 is video. 8 is rigging. And then 9 is where I put all of my embedded classes for symbol construction. And then 10 and 11 are my construction and then rendering light areas. The only similarities that I have found is talking back about Scott Moore. Our approach is very similar, although our specific numbers are quite different, but the approach is the same.
Dan Brown wants to know if you can show how to change the projector to a custom projector.
Okay,
again, or a specific model.
Okay, again, any projectors that are in Vectorworks files in this folder, the tool will see. Okay, the tool will also see projectors that are in the current file. So like when I choose a projector, anything above this line, you see the line right there, is in the current file. And I'd encourage you, Dan, to download the manual. I think you're one of my users, so you should already have the manual. Look at the latter pages where it tells you how to build the symbols. And if you put them in your working file, they should show up for the tool.
Mike Anderson wants to know, do you use mirroring, or are there significant enough issues to avoid it, especially in larger shared drawings?
I'll give you two answers. The current plugin objects, most of them are smart enough that you can use the mirroring tool that's built in. For the tools that don't handle it well, I use an old mirroring tool that was part of the lighting toolkit. Oh man, somebody will have to help me. That's probably Vectorworks 2007. Might have even been a MiniCAD tool that handles some of that well at the same time.
Mike Anderson, and gives thanks to us for doing these shows. You're welcome. He would love to have your thoughts on using your plugins with project sharing, especially with other users who may or may not have your plugins.
Okay, if you're sharing the files in any way, whether it's project sharing or not, another user who does not have our tools will still see the geometry, will still be able to render, see the bits and pieces. The person simply won't be able to edit them. They won't be smart like these are. And that doesn't matter whether it's project sharing or I've sent somebody a file that doesn't have the tools. All of these parameters would be grayed out at their end, although they would know what that is.
Patrick Hins wants to know if you use a zoom lens and set a zoom factor, can that be displayed on your drawing, the zoom factor?
Absolutely.
As like a label.
Yeah, I will come down to here, and let's say I wanted to make that a zoom lens. Let's make it a 1.2, 1.4, text options, projector and lens, show lens info, and there you go. So it'll know, hey, that's a zoom lens, but it also knows what setting I'm using.
Okay, David Dalpin says, Andrew, with VS4 LED, they need to be able to put a bumper on the screen and attach it to spotlight trusses. Is there a way to do that?
Heard loudly and clearly, yes. I will not argue that at all. And quite frankly, without trying to make excuses, the challenge there is if I've created a wall, I haven't figured out yet a way to say, do we use a pair of bumpers for every 2 panels, and if we want the single to go at the beginning or the end of an odd panel count. I simply haven't figured out a good approach for that.
Nathaniel Collins wants to know, does the Landru LED have the same issue as the Spotlight, where the rendered image on the screen, if not a direct camera, will clash with the model and cause a mashed image?
I would have to see, that may be something, shoot me a screenshot when we're done. I haven't seen issues like that. I'd be curious to know what he means by that.
Johannes Verschoot says, how can I do a screen with different module sizes?
The way that the tool is currently built, they all have to be the same size. And that's a limitation of the tool.
But the module sizes are choosable depending on the model of the screen, LED.
Yes. Yeah, just like you saw me here, I was typing in, the 0.5 meter, 1 meter, you can type in whatever you want.
So Tom Mathis says in the LED tool, you can add a half panel, incorporate into the overall PIO, i.e. 2.5 panels tall.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. I'll write that down.
There we go.
See, learning something.
There we go. Is there an audio coverage example to the video screen coverage?
Give me about 30 minutes and we'll get there.
Okay, good. Let me see. And the subject of layers, Mark Esito says, on the subject of layers, classes and template files. How about saved views?
With my template, I've got probably 24 saved views that are part of the template. So that's absolutely part of my workflow.
But if somebody's using it and has a view they want to jump back to, they can save it as a view pretty easily?
Yes, and
Their own view?
it's on our list of I hope we have time to talk about.
Okay. Mark Herring wants to know, and says, you probably don't have time for this, but how do you force a tool into a specific class?
You don't have to force it. Once it's placed, you can change the class. Now,
To anything.
Yeah, to anything you want. Now, if what he's talking about is a default class that you would do through the plugin manager.
Colin Bailey wants to know, is there a guide of how Andrew would make a template as a starting point every time with all the classes, resource items, etc.?
I'm not sure.
He wants your deep and dark secrets.
In the deep and dark secrets, I've already sort of given a what and where mindset going into creating classes and design layers. And then whatever resources I want to use on every single project, I would want as part of my template.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds really simplified, but that in a nutshell, that's the reality.
Yeah. Maya Wildberger wants to know the same question about coverage zones for LED screens.
Yep. That is one thing that with I believe we issued that last fall. We added coverage zone for the LED tool. That's right here. And that's going to be something specific to the Landru Design version.
Ken Newman wants to know if you will be able to share your template so he can get your class and design layer structure.
I don't believe so. With all due respect, that's 25 years of work that's gone into that. Not something I want to share.
That's okay. We can see the chart on the wall behind you. That's all we need to know. The question with do your plugins work with Braeworks?
Do my plugins work with Graeworks?
Brae works. I don't know that.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Okay.
Pete, if you know, tell me. I'd happy to learn something.
I don't know. I'm just reading the words. And can you also, David Delpin wants to know, do you think you could be able to do curved LED screens with your VS4 LED in the future?
That's another thing that's on the list. The two biggies for that tool is figuring out a UI for curves, and then figuring out the UI for bumpers or for hardware.
Just trying to scan down here because we're running almost to 2:30 here. Why don't we stop there for the questions?
Okay.
And if we have one or two at the end, we only have about 10 minutes left. Why don't you see what you can hit off the rest to your work? Oh, and Braceworks was the name of the thing.
Braceworks. Yeah, at this point, none of our video tools work with Braceworks.
Okay. Continue with what you can get into on the last of your thing here. I know we're say have a cutoff time of about 2:30. We might be able to run over a little tiny bit, but we'll see what we can get to. Sure.
Okay. Actually, I thought we had, according to my clock, we've got an hour left. Am I reading my clock wrong?
Yeah, we're okay. We were just talking Central versus Eastern, so you're good. Keep on
Okay, you
going, because I
scared
only
me.
care about the audio. That's what I care about. So we're
Okay,
staying on
there.
until we get to
Go
audio.
for it.
Just
We
kidding.
have plenty of time, Dan. No
Okay, you
worries.
scared me there for a little bit. Okay, so seeing that Kelly wants to hear about audio, I'm going to buzz through the next two tools a little quicker
Yeah, I
than.
got my good stage manager. My TD buddies are on, so take your time. We're all good. Just kidding.
And what's your email address, Kelly, so everybody can tag you?
That's right. All right.
Okay, the next two tools in our list before we get to audio are very similar to each other. They are both path-based objects, meaning that when I select one, I get our familiar polyline interface. So Vectorworks is asking me to click as many times as I want to see vertices, or as many times as I want to mark vertices. The first of the two is called Soft Goods 2, okay? And I'm going to click to insert, and I'm going to double click to end. Then I'm going to accept the defaults. Okay, and what we've created is a curtain object. Because I've only inserted two vertices, a beginning and an end, I have an adjustable length here. So instead of 20 feet, I can make it 50 feet. Okay, and we watch the tool regenerate itself. Okay, and I can change the height. I can change the top trim. Okay, I can show an opening in the middle if I'd like. You see an opening just opened up. I can say that opening wants to be, 5 feet wide. I can show a little ghost in the middle. You may be able to see that's grayed out. Okay. Okay, we'll take the opening away. Okay, we can put in stock widths. Like this curtain knows it's 50 feet wide and my stock width of curtains is 10 feet. So I know I need 5 of them. Okay. Now what you've been seeing is the curtain mode. The other thing we can do is borders, and think about borders in terms of a truss border, not a border in a theatrical sense. So with a truss border, and when I click it, you'll see, you saw the squiggly line jump a bit. That's because our truss would be here, and we want the curtain to hang upstage of it, or downstage. We don't want the curtain hanging with the curtain geometry going through the truss, which would be physically impossible. Okay. The other mode that the tool has is what we call pipe and drape. And as much as I swore that I would never deal with pipe and drape, I've now created a tool that deals with it. Okay. And pipe and drape, we still have adjustable length and height. We can change the slider counts. We can change our slider links, and the tool will rebuild a pipe and drape run for us. And again, this is working in 2D and 3D at the same time. Okay, it'll give us the counts of the drapes again. It'll give us the counts of the uprights. And somebody asked the question earlier about your worksheets. Making a worksheet that will keep track of those counts is not difficult at all. All absolutely doable. That's part of the value of having a tool like that. Being able to send a company like Quest a gear list ahead of time is a nice thing to be able to do. Okay, I'm going to switch back to the curtain mode because I want to point out a feature that I think I'm not real sure a lot of people know about, and that is the simple mode. Okay, here you'll see we've got our squiggly line in 2D, And if we go to 3D, we can see we've got the wavy line at the bottom, and it's straight at the top, you know, like it would be tied off. The catch is users are wanting to be able to say, hey, I've got a printed drop and I don't want the wavy lines. To accomplish that, we simply say we want simple 3D. And now in 2D, we still have a good representation of a curtain. So you're looking at a drawing, you know that's a curtain. But in 3D, you can apply a nice image to it. And the way you do that is you'd come down here to 3D curtain options. The default is opaque, in which case you're simply choosing a color. Second option is scrim, in which you're still just picking a color, but you're getting a scrim approximation. This last option is custom, and it's saying, I want to apply a texture to my curtain. And it's very similar to the video tools in that we've got a picker, and we can choose you know, what we want applied to it. You know, hey, we want sunrise clouds. And now if we do an OpenGL, we can see we've got an approximation of clouds. Okay. And again, that's a nice way to be able to say, you know, I want to be able to show a printed drop in 3D, but at the same time, I'd like to be able to have it show up in a rendering, you know, something that looks like the real artwork that I just handed in. Okay. The another feature, and this is something that's going to be particular to the Landru Design version, is referencing Scott Parker again. He emailed to say, hey, I've got an idea. What if we put our text for soft goods into a bubble? I said, we can probably figure that out. And so now if you're using the Landru Design version, you can say, I want to show something like overall size, and I want my text to be blue, and I want my bubble type to be a rounded rectangle. Oh, and let's make a leader a Bezier. And let's come down here, let's make our custom end marker an oval. And I'm going to make it a 1/16 of an inch. Is my little dot. Okay, so now we've got our text. And instead of just text hanging out in 3D space, we now have our text in a nice, you know, a nice box that works very similarly to the leader line tool. It's just unlike you having to use the leader line tool, that's built in. So you don't need a data tag, you don't need a leader line tool. This is all built into the software. Okay, and all, just like I was saying about the other tools, you can assign that text to its own class if you want, or leave it, you know, assigned with the tool overall. So again, appreciate the user idea, Scott. I kind of like the look. Okay, the next tool that we'll look at is very similar to soft goods in that it's another extruded along or a path object, and this is the stanchion tool set. And what the stanchion tool set's asking me to do is to define your vertices, and I'll double click when I get to the end. And we get your basic airport, I guess nobody's seeing an airport these days, but your basic airport crowd control, okay? You can control, you know, the styles of the stands. You can control what I'm calling the stringers look like. So instead of a belt, you know, what if that's your basic velvet rope, okay? And so you've got a nice velvet rope. And sort of like the other tools, you've got the 3D options, and you can control the different colors. Like we can say the bases, I want to be bronze. The posts, I want to be bronze. Ropes, how about burgundy? And our end caps, let's make them bronze as well. And I'll zoom in and do a final quality RenderWorks. And what you're seeing is the reflection of the white background on the bronze. But you can see a little bit of a reflection here, a little bit of glow along the edge. Okay, and these textures, just like the other textures that are generated by the tools, those are now resources in that file, and you don't need to worry about managing them. The tool does that for you. And quite frankly, if you decide you want to delete one, when the tool can't find it, it just recreates it. So you don't need to worry about that. Okay, so that's it for stanchion layout. Let's go back to our show model. And I'm going to zoom into our upstage, and I'm going to use this to demonstrate what I would call tip number 4. And by doing that, I'm going to change to soft goods and stage curtains. I want to be my my current class. My current design layer, I want to be flown main. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a curtain right on that upstage line and double click when I get to the end. Okay, and you'll see it sitting right on the line. Okay, and and here are the X, Y, and Z values of that curtain. I may not know what this is, but all I have to do is in the box, I say plus, and let's say 4 feet. It hit enter. And Vectorworks did the math for me. I didn't have to drag it. Vectorworks knew that I wanted to move it 4 feet. And like my length right now is 48 inches, or I mean 48 feet. Let's say for giggles and grins, I want to make it 2 meters more. Okay, so I say plus 2 meters in the adjustable length. And then I come up here to X and I say minus 1 meter. Okay, so the tip I'd like to leave with you is there are often times where Vectorworks has dimension and numerical values in the OIP. Don't worry about doing the math in your head. Let Vectorworks do the math for you. You know the height is whatever it is, and I want to say, I want it to be 5 feet taller. So I just type in plus whatever. It'll do plus, it'll do addition, subtraction, multiplication. Let Vectorworks do the heavy lifting for you. I know adding 5 feet onto 20 feet is not heavy lifting, but heck, at 3 o'clock in the morning, who knows? So that's a quick tip, but a tip nonetheless. And tell you what, before I dive into the audio stuff, how are we looking on questions there, Pete?
Got a few. Can the LED tool be odd shapes and have the image cover it all?
By itself, no. I see this question a lot out on the Facebook Spotlight group. What I will very frequently do when I want an odd shape is I'll build a rectangular wall out of individual instances of the tool. And I'll build that so that it's bigger than what I want to cut out. I'll apply one image to all of the tiles at the same time. And then I've got a script that then maps it. It changes the scaling. And then once the image is mapped, then I delete the pieces I don't want. I know it sounds really convoluted, but that's the best approach I've found so far. It's a really good question, though.
Is that the same answer to if you're using a projector plugin and you want to map it? The projector is mapped on a surface, but you won't have a full surface there?
I would say no. The question's actually quite different. As y'all know, those of you who know me, I'm a huge junkie for third-party plugin objects. There's a guy named Josh Bengiat. The guy is a genius. For those of y'all who know his tools, he's got a tool that actually projects light and will let you input projector information and project onto a surface like that. And I'd encourage you to Google his name. Bengiat is how you spell it. Whatever he's asking for the tool, he's not asking enough. Pretty darn cool what it does.
Joe Golden is asking the same unanswerable question again. Is there a simple example of your template that you can share? And he'd be willing to share all his personal information as well. So.
Yeah, Joe, as soon as you share your credit card and,
That's right.
slag
Credit card
everybody, I'm
numbers.
sure we'd be happy to share.
Do you do a lot of project sharing? If you have a different template file that you might utilize when you're sharing a file, William Rios wants to know.
I actually don't do a lot of project sharing. Again, back to what I said at the get-go, most of the teams I work with are not real Vectorworks savvy. So that hasn't been an issue. I will say that when I'm working with a team, the teams I'm working with these days are people I've known for years and years and years. So sharing my file with them is something I will do. But these are, again, people I've known for 10, 20 years. So different question. No offense intended.
Now that we don't get your template file, Neil Rowenborn wants to know, how do you actually create your own template file? Is this just a save as function?
Okay, it's a good question. I'm going to go back here to this. Let's say for giggles and grins that this file called webinar classes, everybody, we're ecstatic with this. We want this to be our template. All I do is I come up to File and I say Save as Template. And it says, where do I want to save it? And I'm going to call this one Dummy. Now it's a template. And now if I want to create a new file based on the template, I say File, New, Use Document Template, and there's Dummy right there. It's that simple to do.
Scott Leathers, back when we get into drapes, I think, is asking, why do you not include a theater style border as an option? I think theater style means it's on a batten, right?
Yeah, and this is going to sound funny. In Andy's head, a theatrical border is just a really short curtain. If you think about the way that they're hung, a 4-foot curtain to me is a border.
Right. Joe wants to know, how can you control the actual length versus the adjustable height?
I'm assuming he's meaning with the soft goods tool. Is that a fair assumption? Let's pretend that he meant the soft goods tool.
Okay.
As long as all I've done is a 2 vertex instance, meaning I've got a starting point and I've double clicked to end, I'm always going to have the adjustable length available to me. As soon as I make it a multiple vertex instance, adjustable length is just feedback of what the running length is.
James Rich wants to know, for those who are either students or early in the industry, how would you suggest they start to learn their organization style with Vectorworks? Well, of course, just get your template.
Wow, you're brutal, dude. I would say I've been referring to the Spotlight Facebook group. There's a lot of activity there where people are asking that sort of question, and you see a lot
Kelly,
of
I think we lost him.
that group. Pardon?
Oh, he's still here.
Okay. I would encourage you to ask that question there. And if you ask the question, you're going to get a bunch of different answers from a lot of people who have pretty strong opinions. But hopefully you'll be able to weed through the ones that make sense and the ones that don't, and find something that works for you. But keep asking the question. Did I just lose Pete?
No, I think well, he says he got kicked off, but I think that was just his connection. Let's go ahead and
Yeah.
let's jump into audio, and then we'll
Oh,
come
okay,
back
Kelly.
because we use the
Push ahead
balance
then,
for
Kelly.
Q&A at
I
that.
was going to take over for Pete, but you push ahead.
Yeah, dude, it's
Let's
audio.
go ahead and push ahead. We're already,
No, no, if you want.
we're looking at a time thing I want to hit. So seeing that Kelly asked,
And that's not about me, but it is. Thank you.
well, yeah. Okay. The last of the tool sets that we're going to look at is the audio tool set. The audio tool set is comprised of 3 tools. All 3 are point plugin objects. The only 2 of them will actually show up in your workspace. One of them is a child object, just like a blended projector is. Okay, the first of the audio tools is called Audio Box. Okay, Audio Box creates, just like the name implies, speaker cabinets. Okay, and here it's thinking. Okay, and when we insert one for the very first time, as a default, its source says library. And this tool has probably had the most work of all the tools in the last year. This library feature is going to be the biggest difference between our version and the current Spotlight version. Okay, and by library it means that once we configure a speaker, we can save it to a library. Okay, configuring a speaker is quite simple. We say, hey, what brand do we want it to be? We're going to make it the Landru. We're going to make it the Mongo 2000. Okay, we're going to say its front width is going to be 36 inches, front height 18 inches, back width 36, and the back height, let's say, is 12. And its depth, let's say, is 30 inches. So what you've watched in 2D, this box be built, but we're also building a cabinet in 3D. So as I've entered in these different dimensions, the box is being built on the fly. Okay, and I can tell it, do I want to flip the orientation or not? Nope, we're just going to leave it on its side. So hopefully everybody can see that. My tilt reference, we're going to say we want to leave it as front. And that, think in terms of how it would rig off of a bumper. We're going to leave its weight as 100 pounds. Constant voltage for a box like this, we're probably not going to be doing. But this is another thing that's going to be unique to our tool versus the Spotlight tool, in that we just introduced being able to track basically speakers for high voltage. You can enter minimum wattage. So let's just say, for giggles and grins, minimum is going to be 10. And Kelly, don't laugh at me. I'm just grabbing numbers out of the air. And peak, let's say 5,000, and impedance is going to be 8. Okay, and we can input dispersion. So it's horizontal dispersion. Let's going to make that 80 degrees, and it's vertical. Let's make it 15. Okay, now let's just say we're happy with that, and we want to see what that dispersion might be. Okay, I'm going to change its Z value to 10 feet, and I'm going to zoom out. And I'm going to come down here, and where it says actual tilt angle, I'm going to say minus 10 degrees. Or actually, let's do minus 20. Okay. So we go to a side view, and we see our speaker is 10 feet off the ground, and we've entered some very, very basic dispersion values. Okay, and then Kelly was referring to this earlier. I want to see the dispersion for that range. Okay, and when I toggle it on, now we're seeing the dispersion, or the coverage zone, if you will, of that speaker. Okay, and now, so just a note here, this is, again, like I said earlier, We're not trying to be sonic analysis software. We're not trying to be ease or anything like that. We just want to see basic, will this speaker sort of cover? Okay, and its listening height is set to 0, which means it's on the ground. Let's change it to 36. And you saw our height, go up to 3 feet. And if we go to 2D, we see, and again, don't laugh at me, but this is just a very basic coverage area of what that speaker might cover. Okay. And just like with a beam coming out of a lighting fixture, the things we see within Spotlight are really good estimates. This is a decent estimate. Okay, and as I change, what my coverage zone is, let's say it's a 120-degree box, we see things change in 2D and 3D. Okay, and what we can do is we can say, let's expand our dispersion features. And these could be, Kelly, you might speak into this if you'd like. These could be like different dB cutoffs, or these could be like high, low, mid, where I could say I want to see here is zone 2.
Right, and I think for me, a lot of this, is a lot of different personal preferences. One thing I did mention to Andrew prior to going on to the webinar is I like to set my horizontals slightly smaller than the factory, because the factory is doing a -6 is what they indicate. So I might want to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go a little more conservative on my horizontal, just to make sure that, my key listeners aren't on the far edge of the lobe. And all these types of coverages just to help estimate, right? Are they in a good spot? If they're over at the edge, maybe I'm gonna want to rethink some stuff, or maybe I'm gonna communicate to my producer, hey, would you please make sure that you put so and so right over here? This is far better, please. But yeah, you're right. These are approximations. And I love that. So I'll let you get back.
Sure. And I love somebody from the other discipline speaking into this, because your words are going to have far more weight than mine. But again, this lets us, in a very general way, see what coverage might be for, again, different dB cutoffs, different frequency ranges. I've seen people use this in different ways. Okay. So now I'm going to hide my dispersion areas. Oh, and before I go on, one thing I will show you is right now that's at 10 feet. We can have that lone speaker, and instead of saying we're flown by motors, we can say, hey, we're on a tripod. Or I think this is a Michael McDermott question. He said, hey, I want to be able to put speakers on mic stands for like hotspots and such. So you've got different options on how to mount them. Okay, but let's say for giggles and grins that we're really happy with that configuration. Okay, and we want to be able to use it over and over and over again. We come up to this button that I referenced a minute ago. We say save type to library, and it says, hey, what do you want to call it? Its default name is it's grabbing the brand and the model from the boxes we filled in earlier. And I'm just going to call this one dummy. And now if I go back to the top, under type, it says dummy. And if I click on that type pop-up, you can see I've got a whole list of speakers that I've got predefined through doing the exact same thing. So we come up here to a DMB V8, and we can see when I chose the V8, it input the dimensions, the weight, and whatever info that I could find about wattage, and whatever info that I could find about dispersions, okay? And just like Kelly was saying, as users get more and more used to the actual hardware they're using, you can input your own values for these different dispersions. like here, or if you want to put in different values, if you've got speakers that are spec'd differently, when you save them to the library, that all gets saved. Okay, and that library, one question that I get, and this is call it a tip, a lot of people ask, well, where is that library stored? That library is just an XML file. It's out here in libraries, defaults, audio tools, and it's called audio toolset data.xml. Okay, and that file works with the Spotlight version of the tool, as well as every version of our tool back to the initial release, which I think was 2009. I think I would have to look. The one thing that I would, and you can share that file as you wish. You can copy it from machine to machine as you wish. The one thing that I would tell you is if you're round tripping it with somebody who doesn't have the most current version of our tool, some of that data, like impedance, might end up getting lost. So you want to be careful if you're doing that. But perfectly acceptable to, like if you have the tool on your laptop and desktop, perfectly acceptable for you to share that file back and forth. Okay. So that's the most basic way that the tool works. Now, one of the big requests we've had over the years is we'd like to import data. Okay, the tool when we started initially always had an import function, and if you look at the bottom of the type list, it says import. The catch is what it would import would be the data. It wouldn't import actual geometry. So it would import the data, populate the OIP like you see it, and then automatically save it to the library and off you go. Okay, but users said, what if I've got really detailed speakers? Okay, therefore, about a year ago, maybe a little bit more, we started working on a symbol mode. And what our symbol mode does is it goes out, I've already closed my Explorer, it goes out in that folder structure that I've been showing you, and it says, in that folder, are there Vectorworks files? And if there are Vectorworks files in that folder, do they contain speakers? And if they do, we're going to populate this pop-up. So this is what the tool is finding out in my local folder. Okay, and just to give proper shout outs to some guys, Dave Dauphine from Novelty in France. I think he's on the call. He is the source of, I think, Bose, all the way down to David. Sorry if I'm going to get you wrong. I think your stuff goes all the way down through the Nexo. And then Leonard Delgado, you heard me refer to him with his, light leaking projectors. He's the source of all this JBL stuff, where these guys were both early adopters and said, we want to make sure that our symbols work. Okay, so you've seen my version, or the generic version of the DMB V8. Here is Dave's version. Okay, so his version, you can see a lot more detail. And if we go to 2D, he's even got some text included. Okay, so a lot more detail than the generic version does. But when I go into that symbol mode, see all these dimensions are still populated. They're just disabled. The wattages, the weight, all that is being drawn from a record attached to the symbol. Okay, and to give you an idea of what somebody else did with it, we'll go down to one of Leonard's files. Oh, let's go down to his VTX G28. Okay, and you can see his files are incredibly detailed. And again, these two guys are early adopters. You probably see them both bouncing around the Facebook group. So if you'd like their take on this whole symbol approach, they'd be really good references. The one thing that I will tell you about this particular approach is that it can be pretty processor intensive, because every time you tilt one, Vectorworks is creating an auto hybrid object. So it's having to do all the math to to figure out how to make it look pretty in 2D. But if I come back to OpenGL, you know, there's Leonard's box, and you can even see his JBL logo on the front of the cabinet. Okay, so that is Audio Box. Okay, Audio Box taken to the next step is Audio Array, and Audio Array creates line arrays. Okay, and this is another parent-child or master-slave type tool, just like a blended screen is. Okay, and while I've got him selected, I'm going to go ahead and give him a trim of 30 feet. And you'll see the OIP for the audio array is pretty darn sparse. That's because all of the heavy lifting happens out here in the configure array dialog. Okay, this dialog gives you the option of defining a bumper, 3 different speakers, and then building your array. And for my bumper, I'm going to say, hey, we want a D&B V. And for my speaker, I'm going to make my A type V8, and my B, I'm going to make a V12. And that's probably going to give me a decent array. I could define a C if I wanted to. I'm not going to for now. And I come back here to this last pane, and it's saying, okay, we've got our bumper showing. What do we want to do with it? I'm going to select my A cabinets. I'm going to click the button for as many as I want to add. I'm going to select my B cabinets. Select for as many as I want to add, and then we're going to put a pullback bumper on the bottom. Okay, and you can see we've got a running tally going. It knows how much of each type of speaker. It knows how many bumpers. Okay, and I can now select the speakers one by one or as groups, and let's say these bottom 2 are going to be a 7-degree difference, you know, between themselves and the ones above them. Let's say that one's going to be a 5-degree difference. And then let's say that this one's going to be a 4-degree difference. And you're watching the array get built as you're changing the values. Okay. I can also go into grab each speaker and input data as I'd like to. And that data will fill in. And I hit OK. And I come back out here to my bumper, and just like with blended screen, it's waiting for me to populate it. I click Populate Array, and now we have our array. And we again have that master-slave parent-child relationship where each one of these is an AudioBox 2 instance. Okay, this is the parent, and this is an Audio Bumper 2 instance that you can't insert from a tool set. This only gets inserted by our parent object. But some things that we can see by selecting our parent object, we now know, hey, we've got 2 bumpers, 6 V8s, 5 V12s. We've got a running weight, 935.02 pounds. And we know what the trim is of the bottom element, meaning you put a trim tape on that bottom bumper and you should be able to run it up and get fairly close. And what I would say is, for those of y'all who haven't seen one before, we'll come out here to the PST webinar. Here is an example of an array calc sheet from DMB. This is for a past project, thanks to Spectrum Sound. The audio designer for the project I was on sent me the sheet and said, for the arrays in your model, here are going to be the display angles between speakers, and the bumper is going to hang at 11 degrees, and it told me the height of a lowest edge, which is going to be right here. And it's surprising how close it is. The tool does not take into account, you know, bolts and, you know, link distances and things like that. But you're going to get close enough where you've got a good idea of, are the bottom pieces going to hang in front of a video screen, or once they wrap it back, are we going to have a collision with a piece of scenery or a lighting truss? Okay. The other and so like I said, this whole symbol mode is specific to the Landru Design version. And then kind of like what I showed you with soft goods, if we come down here to text options, we've streamlined our options a little bit, and that is specific to our tool. And we can also do our bubble like we did. So let's make our text blue. We're gonna make our bubble a rounded rectangle, and our outline color, let's make it green. We're gonna have a Bezier line, and we're gonna keep our little dot again. And our default text location is centered on the bumper, but as soon as I move it away, then the leader line appears. And this streamlined text was something we heard from a few users who were getting tired of just how cryptic some of the feedback was. So we really simplified that. I kind of asked myself, if I'm a production manager, what would I want to see on a drawing? I don't necessarily need to see all the detail that's in an array calc sheet, but by golly, if I know how many speakers are hanging there and how much it weighs, that's information that I can use. Okay. And then coming back to our show model, kind of like we've been doing, we're still flown. We can come down here and we can say audio, here's my PA. And I can add a speaker, or I can add an audio array object. We come out here and enter some values. We're just going to make it all V8s for now. So there's some speakers and there's a pullback. And we'll just say that, I know, Kelly, you're laughing at me about now, but hey, that's what you get when an LD does audio.
Hey, that's okay. Just different wavelengths.
There you go. Okay, and now we know we got our speakers, and I'm going to populate, and I'm going to populate, and now we've got somewhat of a model. We could go to a side view. Hey, look, Kelly, we've got a sightline issue you and I need to talk about. Okay?
Surprise, surprise.
I know it's a shock, but I mean, we're laughing about it. But because of the simplicity of the tool and because it's available within Vectorworks, we can now have that sort of a conversation. And it's something we both can be looking at this. We can be sitting across the desk from each other. And it's a tool that, a production manager or an LD who's not well-versed in audio can still use it and still get some useful information. Okay. And tell you what, I'm going to chase one, we'll call it another tip, call it tip number 5, and then we'll play Q&A for a little bit. And if we have time, there are a couple, 3 best practice things I want to talk about if we have time. Does that sound good, Kelly?
I love that idea.
Okay. Okay. The tip that I want to throw at you, you've seen me popping around my file without going up to the menu quite a bit. That's because I use hotkeys. Okay, and a hotkey means, like, if I tap the C key, I get the magnifying glass for zooming in, and now I can zoom in. Okay, I can say, I think it's Control-Alt-Shift, comma. There's a Control-Shift, comma. Yeah, will take me to a previous view. Okay, so again, I can zoom in on something and I can say, take me back to where I was. So Control-Shift, comma will let me do that. If I'm drawing a line let's say from here to my array, and we're zoomed out a little far, and I want to make sure that I'm getting where I want on the array, I can tap the Z key, and this is what we call the smart loop. Okay, and I can tap it again, and as soon as I've completed the action, my line is placed. So the C is for zoom, Control Shift comma is for previous view, and the Z is for smart loop. Control 1 and Control 2 are for zooming in and zooming out. Okay, again, I'm not going anywhere up in my menus. I'm not clicking any tools. I'm just using hotkeys. Okay. The other hotkeys that are really valuable to know are if you've got a computer or a keyboard with a keypad on it. Your hotkeys on the keypad are correspond to different 3D views. Like if I hit the 2 key, it'll take me to a front view. The 6 key will take me to a right, and the 4 key will take me to a left. Okay, and a 3 key will take me to a right ISO. So really valuable. I'm not having to do any scrolling around, any going to search for things. Just some quick key presses will let me navigate my file. Okay, so that's a quick tip there. And why don't we chase some questions for a few minutes, and then I've got some pretty cool tips if we still have time.
Well, I'm back. I got temporarily kicked off the island. You have anything to
think
add?
about what you did. One
I'm
thing I
gonna go
wanted to
stand in
throw
the
in real
corner
quick. Yes, you think about it, all right?
Go to your room.
That's right. I know that we're going to take our Q&A for audio box and then whatever is left in an audio array, but I wanted to throw out to the TDs, tech managers, production managers that might be on with us right now. You're going to be tempted to jump off during this audio Q&A, and I won't take it personally, but I wanted to let you know April 7th, 3 p.m. Eastern, we're doing Readle MeteorNet. And the reason I say that is we're going to be talking specifically about navigating multiple rooms, navigating the internet as a way to connect, and multi-city, all those good things. So I just wanted to let you know right away, my little TV production programming is kicking in. So I'm going to kick off now and let Pete drive Q&A.
Mark Herring wants to say thank you. I've been a subscriber to Landru Tools for many years, and they represent the biggest time saver. And I know he has no time to use it all on my drafting, along with increased accuracy and precision. Thanks for the thousands of hours you'd poured into these tool sets terrifically. Jeff Jones wants to know, what computer do you currently use? How much RAM?
The computer I'm on right now is a custom built desktop. It's only got a 16 gig of RAM, and I think it's an 8 gig video card. Replacing it was part of my plan for March, and well, things just changed. So I'm sure everybody
and
else
as you told us
understand.
before, you don't do anything else on that computer other than your Vectorworks. No email, no nothing. That's the only program that's on there. Right.
Other than, and one caveat to that is I may have Amazon Music going on it, but other than that, so I lied. I'm sorry.
Exactly. Is there any way to protect, Scott Leather said, to protect symbols the same way you protect your plugins?
At present, no. And by golly, it's a huge item on, I think, a bunch of our wish lists. And for those chasing something for a bit, Scott Leathers is one of the other leaders of the Nashville Vectorworks users group. So shout out to Scott. Good question, Scott. I know it's a frequently discussed question in our meetings.
Is there a list of categories list that let's say you've already started with, but other people could share? Because I know you can make anybody can make a category, but if there's some sort of standard in the industry, like your template,
yeah,
anybody could go to it.
It's a hard question to answer, because you talk to you know, let's say there are 100 of us on the call who all have a template,
Right.
there are probably going to be 100 different standards.
Yeah.
It's something that's different about entertainment from the architectural field in that there really are very few standards. Vectorworks really tried hard a few years ago to create a standard. And that's what you'll see in the Spotlight, the stock Spotlight template. They got mixed reviews on it, but they were really trying to listen to hundreds of people who all had opinions and say, okay, here's a standard we would offer.
Well, it sounds like you need an auto translation module for your program there. How do you hold OIP defaults for your tools? Nathaniel Collins wants to know.
There are two ways to do it. One way is to change the defaults that are in the plugin manager. You definitely can do it there. The catch is every time you upgrade, those defaults get overwritten. The other thing that I have done is I will open the file that is to be my template, and I will insert one of each type of object, like each type of my tool, get the defaults set the way I want them.
Yep.
And then I will save that as a template, and then start a new file, delete those objects, and then resave the template. And those associated with each of those objects is a record, and they get hidden then in the template. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's been my approach.
If you do that, you put it all in your template, and then the software is updated, and you load that template back in, are your original settings all there, or do you have to still re-enter them?
Your original settings are there. Doing an update of the software doesn't change your template.
Okay.
In fact, I mean, I know I'm going to get crucified for this, but like the template that I'm using started 20 years ago. Best practice, the mothership says start a fresh one each time, each version. By golly, I'm using the same one that I started with 20 years ago, and it's been serving me well.
Yeah,
Right.
the templates I use started with Blueprint.
There you go. And you look far wiser than I am, so I'll own that.
Exactly. There was a question I was trying to find, and we'll come across it, I'm sure. How do you start your own template? Is there any rule of thumb for what order you do it in, or how you do it, or do you just work on a project and then just save it as a template and go from there?
You probably don't want to start with a project. You could start with a totally blank file and just start adding elements. You could bum one off of a colleague. That's a way to do it. But I wouldn't start with a show file. You potentially will end up with some unwanted info.
On back to your drape example, Jonathan wants to know, how do you move individual uprights in a pipe and drape setup? You inserted them all automatically equidistant, but what if you needed one to be in a different place?
At present, you can't. At present, the tool just equally spaces them out.
Darius wants to know, will this tool allow us to edit or look at the dispersion coverage of a stock speaker cabinet contained in the VW library?
The hard part to that maybe is the answer. It depends on whether that stock speaker has the correct data attached to it or not, and if that data is correct.
Or do you pick something in the library and edit it to fit your speaker cabinet that you want to use?
That's what most users are doing now, is they're starting with the stock and fixing them. Because they, I mean, they came out with their stock library before I came out with this feature. And I had to basically define some defaults, and at times they matched theirs and at times they didn't, depending on what I had to do.
Ken Newman says, "Oh wow, Kelly as the vocal master, woohoo!"
And thank you for noticing.
Colin Bailey wants to know if you could explain what the process is. Oh, this is that one about template starting point. You already answered that. Stuart wants to know, are the dispersion display arcs all classable?
Yes, they end up in dispersion classes.
And if you make changes to a vendor speaker box, does that save to the default library? Do you have to create a new version?
If you're talking about the dimensions that you're inputting into the OIP, like for AudioBox 2, those get stored to the library file. If you've made changes to the symbol, you'll want to make the fixes and just save it back in place.
Arian says, I am using the same speaker in multiple places in a document, often with different throw distances. If using the tools in symbol mode, how can he adjust the throw distances?
That's a good question. Let's see if I'm using, what I don't remember is if that field
Kelly,
got,
are you there? Have we lost Andrew? Lost me?
Andrew's there.
I'm gone.
Okay, throw distance, you can, when you're in symbol mode, you can adjust it speaker by speaker. And I'm seeing that right here. It is one of the things that I left exposed.
All right, and Mac, you want to pop on with some questions as well? I will join you, and why don't you keep leading us, Mac?
So why don't we take another couple of questions, and then I want to end with a tip that it's a pretty big deal to me. I want to make sure that we don't miss it.
Understood. Let me ask this one question, Mac, if you don't mind.
Sure.
How does this appear to somebody who doesn't have your plugin? Like if I give this back to a production manager who isn't running yours, what will they see and what can they expect to change to or not?
They will not be able to change anything. They will see the geometry, they can delete it, they can move it, but they can't make any of the structural changes that you can make through the OIP or the array dialog.
And I
But
consider
the
that to be
geometry
a
still
good thing.
shows up.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So Mac, go ahead, jump in.
Okay. I'm sorry for the pronunciation on the name here, but Peter Wojcik asks, how can I manipulate the array tool to focus the array directly straight down and have it redraw correctly? It's been a bug for me in the past.
One of the limitations of audio array and the speakers is you can't do any more than a 90-degree tilt.
Okay.
And that I'll admit that's one that's been plaguing. It was a limitation I had to put into place because of some issues I was having early on, and I've quite frankly never been able to fix it.
Okay.
It's on the list though.
Let me see here. Yeah, Phil Barrett asking, if we use your tool set, how does it appear to someone looking at our design in the Spotlight version?
As long as you've got the tools installed on your machine, looks just the same.
Great.
Whether it's a Spotlight install or a Designer install, it doesn't matter. And that is one thing about the tools. People will ask, well, why should we buy your set when we can get them from Spotlight, with a reduced feature set? And one of the answers is these tools work from Vectorworks 2020 all the way back to 2014. It's the same code, same functionality, although we did just make some changes to handle weight a little differently in 2018 and newer. But
Anybody with 2014 needs to update, because if you're sharing files with other departments in the show, you are going to be the worst problem everyone else ever had.
I won't argue, but I did a little survey a month or two ago just to find out where my users were. And I think 95% of my users are 2018 or newer. We've still got a 5% holdout, 17, 16, 15. I think I still had one or two on 2014.
I think we're really running up against our hard out.
Okay, well, let me take 2 minutes. I think I've got 5 minutes.
Yeah, we want you to get the tips that you wanted to get in. We want to get
Okay.
your tips in. That's where we're going here.
Okay. The biggest tip here, and probably I'll admit one of my pet peeves when I'm looking at other files, is that people are not using what we call save views. Okay, and a save view says, I want to return to this state. Okay, so if I like what I'm seeing now, I can come up to the save view menu and I can say save view. And I'm just going to call it work all. Okay, and I go to a different view. I change class settings. I turn classes on and off. I zoom in, and let's say we want to save another view. Let's call it video. Hey, and I want to go back to where I was. I could go back to the working all, and there I am. And I can go back to the one I called video. And I'm popping through it really, really quickly, but I can't overstate how important the feature is. People have said, how the heck can you manage having 150, 200 classes? That's because I've got saved views that help me remember, where I was to see different things. Like the working overall will take me to this. If I want to work on just the set, I've got a save view that just makes, my staging classes visible. If I want to work on video, working video, I've got, classes visible that will let me see the video. Okay, so the save views help me remember the class settings. They also help me remember, where I was in terms of my view. Like in terms of where I was, if I wanted to make a save view of, call it an elevation, we just call that working side now. Okay, so for me, functioning as a designer, it lets me navigate around my file really, really easily. Okay.
Question from Pete. If you wanted to share these views or this drawing with somebody who doesn't have Vectorworks, how would you recommend the best way to do that? Just share views, send them a PDF of a view, or?
You would want to do two things. Either you'd want to export a PDF or a graphic of some sort, or get them to download the Vectorworks viewer, and then they can have access to the saved views.
Now, in the Vectorworks viewer, would they see all the classes as well? Yep. And that may be a little confusing for someone who doesn't know Vectorworks. They wouldn't know where to go to find something.
It would be, but I'm going to go back to this. The part of the power of the saved views is I can send my Vectorworks model to somebody who doesn't know anything about Vectorworks, who, let's say it's the owner of a company who has draftspeople working underneath him or her. And Mr. Owner, I can say, go to the eyeball icon and go down to where it says working set.
Instruct them how to get to the view thing.
Or like there's a production manager I work a lot with where there's a section up here that says PERS, and I put a bunch of perspectives there. And I'll be on a call with them and I'll say, hey, Chris, we've got a sightline issue with section 300. Look at perspective high right.
Yeah.
Let's let Andrew finish his final tip, because then we're going to have to get off because we are against a hard out here.
Okay,
Yes,
that
1
was
minute.
my final tip. And I wanted to end with it because that one to me is the biggie. I see a lot of really intricate files that aren't using save views. And like if I'm trying to do tech support with somebody, it's impossible for me to navigate without them if the person's not using them. So a biggie to me, I cannot recommend you using them enough. There you go.
I can't agree more. That is a great tip. And I'm going to break my own rule, but this one just kept coming up. Where is the screen referenced in terms of height? Is it from bottom of screen, top of screen, middle of screen? So when you
Bottom of the
specify
screen.
screen height, bottom of screen, that was an easy one there. So thanks so much, Andrew. I can't thank you enough. I learned a lot about my audio stuff. More importantly, I kind of learned a little more about everybody else's tools too. I think you highlighted best of all knowledge learned versus knowledge earned, right? So you're going to take this knowledge that you learned today, folks, and you're going to go apply it, and you're going to learn, and then you're going to earn what works best for you by using that. Like you said, Andrew, connect with those Facebook groups, connect with LDs if you're in lighting, audio designers, scenic designers. If you're part of a production management team, find out what's working, what's not working, because the people you're collaborating with are probably going to help you define what your best organizational structure is. Because just because you have a structure you like, if you're working with the same people and over, find something that works for all of you or adopt that system. So, you know, it's clear we're going to need another Vectorworks class. So I had a couple people send me a note. Hey, can we start with some basics? And it's like, absolutely. I kind of knew this was going to happen, but this is how we roll here. We come in, we'll hit you, and then we're just going to keep making it up as we go. TDs, I already told you, April 7th is our MeteorNet session. Join in on that, be a part of that. Thanks again to everybody. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us. Everybody go to his website, get these plugins. The more of these plugins that are floating around, the easier my job is. So, you know, if we're all using that, I'm a visual person. I like to see the room the way it's going to be. So again, thanks to everybody, and we'll look forward to our next time together. So long.
Thanks, everybody.
Remember the video is available in about 24 hours on our website. Thank you.
Correct. Yes, practicalshowtech.com archives. There you go.